Wanted to talk a little TNA versus AEW because while these two companies necessarily aren't crossing paths like TNA with NXT, they are doing things that are very unique in retrospect. And we'll start with AEW. And if you haven't caught on, these upcoming Collision taping this week that we're recording is not going to be from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus. That was canceled. Instead, it's going to be at a convention hall as a part of a larger kind of gaming hobby convention, and where I don't necessarily know if you have to pay admission to the Collision itself. But either way, it's not a traditional arena. It's going to look more probably like if you went to a wrestling show that was taking place at a convention, similar to like at WWE World when they host, wrestling things that go on at like Access and such like that. So that is happening with Collision. But on top of that, in the upcoming weeks, AEW is also running Dynamite and Collision from the Hammerstein Ballroom. And they won't be trying to go for full Hammerstein Ballroom like ECW might have back in the day, because I believe they're still bringing in their traditional set. So they're looking at around the 1,500 to 2,000 seat range and adding in both, it's a smaller venue, but also the kind of the mystique about using that venue should have no trouble drawing that crowd. But at the end of the day, right, it isn't 5,000 plus or, 10,000, what you might see for Raws and SmackDowns nowadays. But on top of that, in the world of using arenas and how they're using them currently, the upcoming Australian Grand Slam event that is scheduled for February. If you haven't caught on, they're originally scheduled to go to a place called Suncorp Stadium, which is like a soccer stadium that hosts between 20 and 30,000. I'm not exactly sure right offhand here, but I do know that it was a stadium show. It was expected to draw at least over 20,000, and that has been pushed to an indoor arena that is more in the 10,000 seat and under range. I think maxed out about 13,000 seats at this arena where AEW Grand Slam Australia has been moved to. And final point on top of their restructuring, which I just want to say, I don't necessarily think these are all bad things, but it just shows that they're needing to do these things. The layouts for upcoming AEW Dynamite shows have shown that AEW is pulling in the stage much further in so that it cuts off these arenas. Now, some of these arenas are going to have capacities of like 9,000 people, right? They're drawing 2,000 or 3,000 in those arenas. A typical setup, if you go to an AEW Dynamite, looks like you're going to Raw or SmackDown on the WWE side of things. But in upcoming events, it is showing the seating chart as AEW pulling their stage into, let's say if it's a basketball court, closer to mid-court, and really tightening things up to use half of these arenas. Now, these are not Madison Square Garden. These are, like I said, only like 10,000 seat arenas, but shrinking it down to essentially meaning that a sellout about the seats they're putting on sale would be like 4,000 people. I've seen this kind of done before for like concerts. If you go to like an arena and there's a concert and maybe it's winter time, so they're not expecting a huge crowd, they pull the stage in to about like mid-court of a basketball court and kind of have a smaller floor and then kind of utilize it. If you're sitting on one of the ends, you're a lot closer than, you might have like really good seats, similar to what you might expect to see at the Hammerstein Ballroom when they use that. But taking that into account with AEW and moving things over to TNA, they announced 2 shows in the upcoming year, one in Los Angeles at the current home of the USC Basketball Trojans, which holds about 5,000 people, and an even bigger one for TNA Slammiversary, which will be next spring, summer, and where they're going to go to the UBS Arena, the current home of the New York Islanders, with a capacity of over 16,000 people. Now, the layout, I'm not sure how they're going to use that arena. It's not like a convention center where there's different rooms. It's one main room. But their largest crowd ever was in 2012 at a lockdown event that drew 7,200 people, and they've also in the United States, and they drew 8,000 people one time at Wembley Arena in London. But those are their largest crowds ever, and those go back to the TNA days where Sting was essentially the headliner with Kurt Angle's and that. So I guess my question, and all of this bringing up to you, we'll start with TNA. Do you think TNA is going to be able to sustain like using this arena at full capacity come next spring with the roster they currently have, and just Is it smart for them to be booking the UBS Arena on Long Island?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I feel like I feel like TNA is a better product right now overall than AEW. And what does that tell you? If they're trending upward, TNA is trending upward for capacity for these crowds, for these arenas and all that. And then AEW is going in the other direction. And you mentioned, maybe moving the stage up a little bit closer and things like that. What does that tell you about the state of TNA versus AEW? It just tells them TNA can draw a better crowd, I think, right now than AEW. I mean, that's the unfortunate fact, but at the end of the day, I mean, TNA is just doing a better job, I feel like, of creating better stories. It's not just matches for the sake of matches. That's been the problem with AEW as of late. It's just, they're putting on some dream matches, quote unquote, but they're not putting anything behind them. There's no story, there's no emotion from the crowd. It's just two competitors just kicking the crap out of each other. And yeah, sure, the matches themselves are good, but the builds themselves are just not. They're unsatisfactory, so to speak, and you could tell because the crowd in a lot of cases, in a lot of these matches, are kind of mild. To be honest with you, it's like, how do you invest in a matchup of two competitors? Like AEW does, when you're not building a story. You're just like, yeah, this guy's really good. This guy's really good. Let's just have him wrestle. To me, and this is, I've been saying this for a long time with AEW. This is like Tony Khan's like fantasy booking. It's like when he's the billionaire's kid. He probably had the same toys we did as a kid, and he's like, man, I'd love to get these guys to wrestle each other one-on-one. And let's be honest, why can't we just build better storylines? Like, I just want to see better storylines. I enjoy the matches, but at the end of the day, WWE's knocking it out. TNA is, that's on topic. TNA is doing much better in that department because they're actually building stories. So that's why you're seeing things like TNA is booking big arenas and AEW is booking smaller venues. That's just the way it is right now. It's because TNA is just better.
With TNA, they do have some things coming up in the sense of a lot of people are expecting Josh Alexander to maybe not be returning to the company pretty soon and moving along. On top of the fact that, this isn't they haven't sold this arena out yet, right? We don't necessarily know the seating chart going forward. I imagine they wouldn't be booking this arena, though, if they weren't trying to use this arena, right? There's a million places, especially in the New York City area. I mean, they could use the Hammerstein Ballroom. They could use nightclubs and Columbia University and Fordham and all these different kinds of places. So it's not like they have to use a major arena, even if they don't fill it. I imagine they're not booking this place, and I imagine it's not cheap either if they don't plan to do something with it. It's going to be interesting going forward. They obviously over the weekend kind of picked up Matt Riddle. He made his debut, obviously, with TNA. We've seen JBL kind of do some things, not just in TNA, but all over, kind of showing up in GCW and TNA, and he's kind of, I don't know what he's necessarily doing. It's weird because, you see that happen with some major stars trying to keep themselves relevant or like reinvent themselves, Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes. But JBL, you're kind of wondering, like, reinvent yourself. Like, what are you needing to do here?
I think JBL is just, he's got that itch where he just wants to make some towns and has some fun. And the guy that's a legend in this business, a lot of these promotions are like, yeah, I want JBL to come work for me. I mean, look at Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff just did NXT this week. He's doing MLW, I think, this weekend as well. So, like, Eric Bischoff is doing things, and and they're both, legends in this business for one way or the other. And you know what? Do they need the money? Probably not. I think they're probably both doing well. But I think they just get the itch, and if they want to scratch that itch, they're legends. They can make a few phone calls, or people can reach out to them and say, hey, you want to do a show? And they're probably like, yeah, here's my dollar amount.
JBL isn't just coming and doing a match, though, like, an indie match. He's got these strategic kind of surprise end of the show appearances where he's like knocking out the main event talent and walking away kind of thing.
Yeah, I did see that. I did see that recently. I think that's cool. I mean, obviously he's probably getting paid a good load of cash to do it, because to get somebody like JBL to do these type of things, you're probably going to have to pay him a decent chunk of change. And I think the same goes for Eric Bischoff. I feel like they're paying him a decent chunk of change, and I think that's cool. I think it's I think it puts extra eyeballs on a different product. Like Eric Bischoff is doing MLW. I think that's going to be good for MLW. I mean, MLW is one of the better independent promotions out there. So I think that's cool. And then JBL doing things in TNA, I think is very cool as well.
I think with TNA, it's going to be interesting. They have a lot of months to build this up. Currently, right now, Nick Nemeth is the world champion.
Yep.
Moose is the X Division champion, and the Hardy Boys are the tag team champions as of right now. And I think Masha Slamovich is the women's champion. So those are your champions right now. And I'm just, Matt Riddle just obviously made his debut pretty recently with TNA. So there's going to be, interest going forward in how they can book this. I think it's a huge swing. And I think the one thing TNA just has to make sure, because here's the thing, AEW has that TV deal. They don't have to worry about any backlash because they've just received it. We're giving them that backlash right now. We're talking negatively about them in a light, right? But yeah. TNA, right, has been trending upwards. But, they haven't had that big challenge. You look at it like in sports, right, when you see a team that's undefeated, but they haven't faced that main competitor yet. And they're like, we want the main competitor. Well, be careful what you wish for, because if you have that main competitor, you swing and you miss, then people you're going to not just shoot back to where you were, but you might shoot below. So you might, so with TNA, they got to make sure that they are doing this very strategically, because we obviously take pictures and show everybody about what AEW shows look like that are half filled and giving away free tickets. So if TNA tries putting on their biggest pay-per-view of the year, and we know numbers, right? Even if they got 8,000 people at this event, but there's tarped off seats, people are going to point to those tarped off seats. That's just what they do. So they got to just make sure that they're doing this strategically. They put on a good presentation. They put on probably the best match that they and the best card that they possibly can.
Let's be honest. If TNA, say they don't sell it out, but they sell out, let's say 75, 80%, that's like 50% better than what AEW's been doing lately, to be honest. So I think that's a win.
Well, absolutely. But, this kind of, I don't want to say this got started, but at one of their last pay-per-view events, it might have been Bound for Glory in Detroit, when they sold the place out, getting about, 3,000 people. A lot of people were saying, hey, look at this. They just sold this place out. They're the new number 2. A lot of people out there saying TNA is the new number 2 with the 3,000 crowd that they had, not realizing that 3,000 AEW fans they get on a Tuesday night in the middle of winter. It just looks bad because it's in a 9,000 seat arena, right? So
yeah,
what you're saying is the numbers are fine. To be honest with you, with AEW, the numbers are not horrible because of the fact that they're doing it weekly. I always kind of look at it like this. We have a local baseball team, and they talk about how they're the second most attended sporting event in Syracuse, New York, right? We have college football, we have college basketball, we have big-time hockey, we got minor league baseball, and they say they're number 2 behind that when it comes to attendance. And a lot of people would question, what are you talking about? You get 3,000 people a game. And they'd say, you put all our season totals together and put, like football, who only has like 8 games together, and look at it, boom, our number's bigger than their number. So it's not an even comparison, right? But that's the kind of thing. So AEW on the surface is doing pretty good because, they're getting 3,000 people for Dynamite and 3,000 for Collision. But on a monthly basis, how many people are going to an AEW show in the month of November versus how many people are going to a TNA show in the month of November, right? One has got like 25, 30,000. One has got like, I don't know, 5,000 maybe if they're running 1,000 a week times 5 shows, right? So the AEW number is small, each time, but there's more of them. I don't think AEW is necessarily in trouble. I do think, though, if they want to stay where they are in the sense of the rise, because it's hard to judge because AEW started so strong, and then many times people looked at them like a WWE competitor and looked at them like, oh, it won't be a matter of time before they take WWE out. You know what I mean? And they started to sink. And I understand that, people go through highs and lows, but AEW's held to a very high standard. And after they came out the gate as strong as they did back in 2018, they can't really afford to slip up. And I think the big thing is what you mentioned, right? It's stories. AEW, I think it's time that we move into the story world that they don't necessarily have. Some of the best AEW stories are actually like New Japan stories that they're bringing over to AEW, where they're like got Jay White versus Hangman Adam Page rekindling their rivalry from New Japan and using that as a story.
Dude, that's all they do. And it's like, to me, that's do I want to watch good matches? Of course I do. Like, I'm a wrestling fan, but I also want to see good stories. And for a long time, WWE was lacking those good stories. And guess what? With everything going on with, for example, the Bloodline's been going on for the last few years, and it's been one of the biggest things in wrestling. And you're getting there. I know Triple H. He hypes up the money train and all that stuff, but there's more eyeballs on WWE than there ever has been. Which there's more people out there that are exposed to the wrestling business, and AEW should take notes of this because if you want to get more attention and you want to get more eyeballs and do that, you got to have stories, but you also need to get creative. And the whole thing with what was it, the Costco guys or whatever the heck, I forget their names, but they're like TikTok, whatever. And that the crazy thing was there were AEW fans that were not happy about it. I'm like, you're getting exposure. Like do you want to have a few thousand people watch this, or do you want to watch millions watch it? And that's the difference because of the Costco. I don't know the whole thing, but it's like Costco Brothers or something. And
AJ, I was there. I saw the match. I don't really know who he is either. But
yeah,
I
that's
know he's the TikTok sensation.
But if you look at the video with him and QT Marshall, there was millions of views if I'm not mistaken. I didn't watch it, but I heard from different people. I've talked to different people that said that gave AEW some exposure that they probably didn't expect, which I'm not surprised that they got it because in this day and age of social media and what these folks that are social media gurus and they're social media famous. That's the stuff you got to tap into. WWE's doing a good thing with that. Look what they've done with like a Logan Paul, for example, or like a famous famous musician like Bad Bunny. Like you get all these different people that normally don't watch wrestling to watch it because they see Logan Paul, they see Bad Bunny, and then they're like, oh, this is actually pretty good stuff. And then you draw some more people in. I think AEW's fan base, they don't want to see that. But how are you supposed to grow and be bigger overall if you don't take these type of chances? That just doesn't make sense to me.
I think we'll just end this on the same way that we've ended a lot of AEW talks, and that is just there's got to be people around Tony Khan that Tony Khan listens to outside of just himself. And that is the success with AEW going forward. It's going to be a group success. It's not just going to be led by one man, Tony Khan. It's going to have to be a group effort. And Tony Khan's going to have to kind of accept those outside voices, and not just from the wrestlers picking their own storylines. I mean, from actual creative people kind of, taking the reins there. Because obviously that's another negative too. If you're just listening to, letting the wrestlers, book things, the EVPs, if you will, you know what I mean? So you gotta have creative people around you.
Well, dude, here's last point. It kind of reminds me like at the bad part of WCW, like you're letting wrestlers like be bookers in a way too. Like that's you don't want.
That's kind of how this company was founded a little bit, right? With like the Kenny Omegas, the Young Bucks, the Cody Rhodes, which was fine at first, but obviously now it's getting to a point where, like I said, everything has to evolve. WWE has to evolve. TNA has evolved many times, right? They've gone to Impact and Global Force.
Give TNA its due. For the longest time, let's be honest, we kind of in a way we almost kind of looked at them like, all right, yeah, okay, good for you. But they're still going. Good for them. Good on them for evolving. And right now, they're trending upward. So kudos to TNA. Great job.